1122. Charlie Baker on the NIL. This is to Nicole Arbach in The Athletic. It's important to come up with some kind of framework, whether it's ours or federal framework. There needs to be some measure of respect for the position we're putting a lot of our student athletes and families in. We have to come up with some kind of transparency approach to deal, or to how we deal with this stuff. Now, that's not any breaking news that anyone else hasn't said or written or columned or even opinions before, but this comes from Charlie Baker, the new president of the NCAA. Whether any of that can happen or not, Linda Livingstone at Baylor has mentioned that too. And so there's a quote, his first quote, at least from this article today.
I just don't trust our federal government to do anything. I'm surprised at day to day that we don't have a national power outage based on how much that they like to argue. And until this gets to a point of where this is a huge deal for more than half the states, and I don't know that it is, because part of the issue is that you've got a bunch of states here that, it would never, even in the maybe even some of the rosier times of political efficiency, that name, image, and likeness at their universities is just not going to be that big of a deal. I mean, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, places like Hawaii, Alaska, Maine, pretty much all of New England really don't have this issue, right? They don't have, yes, their kids can make NIL, but, this is an issue in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Texas, a certain part of the United States that, while there might be more people, it's kind of maybe concentrated a little bit. So it's really hard to get that stuff through when there are a bunch of states that won't care one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that there needs to be some framework in place, but man, I feel like this is deja vu, and that this is the same thing we've heard 100 times already from those in charge who are desperately seeking the government to come fix this problem for them, and yet we know what the response is. It's total silence on the part of the government for the most part, and total inaction in terms of them having shown any sign that they're willing to go and make this move to solve all the problems of the NCAA and clear up all of the questions that are currently lingering around college athletics. What indication has been given that this help is on the way? None. And yet this is, once again, the line that's thrown out because it simply seems to be the only line that the NCAA has to play at the moment to try and solve these issues, is to get help from the outside. And I just don't know how this is really all that different outside of the fact that it is the new president, and outside of the fact that he's at least using words like framework. He's not outright saying, please save us, or we need you to solve this. It's at least we need to put in some framework. I'm on board with that. Explain what that would be exactly. Explain what steps you can take, and explain how you can take some of those steps on your own in the meantime, because if the whole thing is based around the NCAA getting bailed out, basically, then this is just going to go on until it basically disintegrates. I mean, what other option is there? They're going to help or they're not. And every arrow has pointed to they're not going to help you anytime soon side of things, at least based on what I've seen. And maybe you guys have seen differently. Maybe y'all have seen a parachute floating out of the sky somewhere where there's some governor or some official that's open-minded and willing to help save the day. But I haven't seen that. And all I've really seen is just different people saying basically the same thing, is please help us. And I just don't know that they're going to get that help. So again, if you think that could happen, okay, that's fine. But guys, my question remains, and it's remained the entire saga. If they don't help, or they're not going to help, then what is your next option? And are you at work on that? Because you have to start planning some different methods here. If this is the one and only, then this is not going to work out very well for you. You got to have some other options, and we haven't heard anything on what those might be. So maybe that's some of the framework he's talking about, or something else. But yeah, the government doesn't appear to be on the horizon for help.
Well, here are some chat. Let's hold on, because Paul, some of them are in response to you, and a lot of people agree with you. Let's just assume nothing will happen. The Pac-12, until some legitimate, reputable source discussing what I mentioned earlier says a Pac-12 media deal is done, where that might come from the commissioner, it might come from the conference, it might come from somebody else who covers them, and whoever it might be. Email, Paul, you should not trust government to do anything for you. They only line their own pockets, make life more difficult for citizens to operate. from Bobby trusting the federal government, and I was part of it for 22 years, and he has the laughing emoji.
Well, I mean, that's why I don't Bobby right now. It's, but yeah, true. I mean, he knows.
Here's another one. Jeff, hold on, Paul. I'm from the government, and you're not going to work. And he had the laughing emojis as well. So there's just some of it, and they better start lobbying. They want help from the federal government, and even then, there's a lot of people lobbying for people to do other things in the federal government.
And the reason that they've come to this conclusion that they need the government, which is a rough part for anybody to get, is that, they operated under the framework of we're an organization and we've agreed to rules. And then they got to a point of where people started to say, well, yeah, we don't really like your rules. And they said, well, tough. There's nothing you can do about it. And then people realized, like, yeah, but how can you enforce it? Because you're not a federal agency. You're not a state agency. You don't have subpoena power. You don't have police. You're not really a law. It's just a rule. And, if the rule is infringing on the rights of an individual American, then it can be challenged as being against the law. So what the NCAA found was that a lot of things they were doing were not enforceable or, even really legal. They lost in court. So they need the government to pass a law because they can't enforce anything because they are just an organization. So
all right. Okay.
That's why they need the government. The problem is the government just doesn't care.
And may just pop their lips and whatever. From NCAA President Charlie Baker on the haves and have-nots as far as the future of the NCAA and college football. There's no question that the Power 5 conferences are in a different place than basically everybody else. I've talked to some of the Power 5 people about this, and I've talked to other people who aren't in the Power 5 about this. This is an important part of what we need to be looking at going forward. What is the best way to deal with that particular issue in this day and age? Again, this isn't breaking news, but it's his first day on the job. There's a written article by Nicole Auerbach in The Athletic, and so I thought we'd put out a couple of quotes from him, the acting now current president of the NCAA. He also mentioned that sometimes when you have what looks like the Power 5 against the others or the haves against the have-nots, and I don't like that, and some people don't like Group of 5, whatever else it is, he said that in his position, when he's gotten into any kind of, whether it's not negotiations, but talks about something that needs to be settled or move forward one way or the other, that normally once he gets involved and gets to hear from people, that maybe they're not as much against each other or not as much on different pages as some people may think.
Well, I
that
think
remains to be seen.
I think that's actually true for a lot of things in life, but I do think that we need to start taking realistic looks at things. I think that was maybe Mark Emmert's probably biggest problem, was that he had no ability to look forward. He was only a guy who was, well, this is how it is. Okay, but that only is going to get you so far. Eventually, this is how it is. Well,
this is how it is now because of this is how it was.
Yeah. The minute that, the 50% becomes 51 to 49, that's not how it is anymore. And then it tilts in another direction. So yeah, there are a lot of things that the NCAA did wrong and probably could have prevented, because there was a time where I think people were willing and accepting to work within the framework of an organization and saying, okay, let's do this. If you guys do this, we'll give you that. But the minute that you start being unilateral and saying, we're only going to do things this way and you'll have to fight us to the death, well, that's what happened. That's what happened with NIL, and that's why it's changed now, because the NCAA, instead of changing their ways and trying to adapt with the times and realize that the business model had changed over the years and things were going against them, said, no, we're going to dig at our heels and you will fight us until we will burn to the ground. Well, when you threaten, you better be ready, because that's what happened.
So there's the quote from Charlie Baker. Also,